Hello, everyone. Happy Friday and welcome to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I'm your host, Coach Elex. And of course, with me, my amazing co host,
Stephen Frederick.
Stephen the Medium, is in the house. And I think we have an awesome topic again today. Today, we are going to be talking about, are you living or are you performing? And this is the conversation about the difference between living authentically versus living for approval, seeking validation from others. So I think this is applicable to all of us. Stephen, what do you think?
I think so too. It's a good subject.
It is indeed. So if this is a subject that calls to you, stay tuned because we're going to dive deeper into what that means. But we're not going to do that until we check in. Stephen, how are you? I know there's plenty happening. You have a major event coming up tomorrow. So tell everyone, what are you up to?
Well, I will be in Rhode Island tomorrow at the Crown Plaza Hotel from 7 to 9. That is going to be a really exciting event because it's the first time I'm doing an event of not only doing readings, but if any of the audience has questions to their loved ones in spirit, they can ask. So that's really exciting and very different. So I'm really excited about that. I haven't been in Rhode Island in a long time to do any kind of event. So you can still get some tickets at stephenthemedium.com or via Eventbrite.
Fabulous. So those Rhode Island groupies better get ready. We want to see you all in Warwick, Rhode Island for that amazing event. Because that's really unique, Stephen. I mean, not only are you going to be doing your readings, but to get questions, to be able to ask those questions that we've been holding on to our loved ones, I think that's pretty awesome.
I don't think anybody would not have at least one question. I mean, if it's just something as simple as, were you scared when you crossed over? Were you in pain? What is it like? I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
I think there's definitely more than one question. So
yeah,
get your tickets now. So Stephen, what else is going on? What else are you up to?
Then I have another event that is in Wareham, Mass. That's coming up, which is I believe the 21st of August with another medium. With another great medium, Scott Allen. So that's going to be really interesting because I've never done an event with another medium. So that should be really interesting, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm just living life.
And by the way, that on the 21st, as you already know, I'm going to be in Atlanta because I have business in Atlanta. But I can tell you, I already know people who bought tickets to go see you at that event.
Really?
I'm not going to say who they are because they like to stay private. They want to surprise you, but I do know people who will be there.
Well, that's very exciting.
Exactly. So, and what else, Stephen? I mean, I know you are already getting very itchy because every night it's starting to feel like fall. And that is a major time of year in this household.
It's gigantic. It's huge. Yes. In the past, I don't know, 4, 5 days, 6 days, we haven't even had the AC on because it's just been so beautiful here, especially at nighttime. So yeah, it does get that feel. This morning when I went running, there were people, not a lot of people where I was running at the canal, but there were people that were walking had little sweaters on, which was very nice. I already saw foliage. I already saw foliage.
You love it. Yeah, we haven't had the AC that we paid. We spent $15,000 on that we needed to have, but that's okay. We'll leave that. That will be another conversation for another day.
There's going to be this weekend coming up, and this week we're going to be using it because it's going to get warm. So, yes.
Well, I'm excited because Sunday, I know we're going to the beach Sunday, so I'm super excited about that. And, Stephen, we want to do a shout-out to our Canadians because they're back home. They're back in Canada.
Yes.
and we had a great time with them.
That week just flew by with both of them. And I know they had just a fabulous vacation with us and days that you and I were working and they just went out by themselves. They also had such a great time too. But those Canadians, can I just say, can shop.
Yes, they can. They can shop and shop and shop again. But they were super generous. I mean,
They
they
were.
got us some beautiful things and very, very thoughtful, very generous. So if you're listening, Canadians, thank you for everything. And I got my beautiful mask, so I'm gonna be treating myself, and Stephen will be doing so.
Yeah, as long as you don't wear it in the middle of the night and I think you're Freddy Krueger and I just, grab anything around me and just throw it at you, we're good.
Yeah, I don't. Do you know what that mask is called, Steven? Because I don't even know. I'm just
You're
said the
you're the one that bought it.
I know, but I can't. Geez, Louise, what is the name? I know it's like a cryo glow mask, and it's just designed to reduce fine lines and make your skin beautiful and young. So
Well, it also has received a lot of really good reviews.
yeah, the one we got is absolutely top of the line, and I can only thank the Canadians for making sure they did the research and they bought one, and then I bought one myself for the two of
Yeah,
us.
it was also the same price as the AC, right? Wasn't that 15,000? No?
No, it was slightly less, but it was not cheap. Just saying,
Yeah.
that was definitely not cheap at all. And yesterday, Stephen, we also had a visit from a young man that we admire because this young man, I met him through one of my clients. I don't know, 5 years ago maybe, and at a very young age, he was very driven, very determined. He knew that he wanted to go to LA and pursue film and production, and he did that on his own, Stephen, on his very own. And he's been there, what, 4 years? He told us yesterday,
Yes. Yeah,
and
4 years, I think at the end of the year, in October.
and has developed an amazing network, and it's doing so well. And I am so proud of him. So a shout out to our boy Ian
Yes.
Dumas.
Hey, Ian. And you know what? Also, for people that are wondering, I spoke to Mark, who
Oh, yes.
normally produces our show, and thank God we have Dave, who's been doing it. Thank God. But Mark is moving along. He's home. He is still doing therapy, and he is definitely getting better every single day. So he just yes, I know he's antsy and he's looking forward to getting back to normalcy and getting back into not only producing our show but also doing his show. So that's his goal.
Did you tell Mark that he needs to be on the lookout for Dave because
Dave's taking over.
yeah, he wants to take over. So I don't know. He needs.
Well, I did tell him how Dave's doing a great job. Yeah, I did.
Dave
but
Dave
yeah,
is about to sabotage Mark so that he can take over our show. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just
No,
saying.
but I'm glad I got to speak to him and everything is definitely moving in the right direction. So that's really good.
And then the other thing, Stephen, I don't know because I know had some people asking about the status of our the America's favorite couple in the contest, and we don't know, right? What happened?
Oh, we do.
Oh, we do. So we
We
didn't
do.
make it.
We are now, because we weren't the top one in our group. I think we were two. We are now entering the wild card. So there's a wild card category, and just I guess we have to get as many votes to move on to the final stages. So we are definitely not out.
Oh, I thought we were out. So that's exciting.
No.
Very exciting. So I just want to know who took over that number one spot that we held for so many weeks
I don't know.
consistently. So as soon as we put it out on social media, we need your votes. We need to get back on the number one spot for the wild card. Please, 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 please help
Absolutely.
us.
We definitely will post that today.
So, anything else, Stephen? Oh, by the way, I just forgot. I wanted to say, by the way, you know Dennis and Marie, right? So Dennis had surgery today. They were in Boston. He had some hand surgery. So
Wow,
he
I
did.
didn't know that.
I didn't know until I spoke to Marie this morning. He did quite well. So, a shout out to Dennis and sending you, Dennis, lots of healing energy and, healing light. And hope you recover promptly.
Yes, he will. That is a very, very strong guy. So he definitely will. And plus he has just mentally has a really good perspective. So I know he will do really well. And plus he's got Nurse Marie.
Of course, it doesn't get any better than that.
No way.
Even though Nurse Marie is taking care of many other sick people around around her, so she's quite busy. But anyways, what else was I gonna say, Stephen? Our friend. Just so that you know, I was notified that our friend John, who listens to our show religiously every Friday, had some appointment today at 1 p.m., so he's not going to be able to join and listen until 1:30. So that's been noted, Stephen.
Well, you know what though? Like, seriously, this is your one VIP part of the week, and you just can't push it to 1:30. 2 o'clock rather. See, this is when you really start thinking, where's the love?
And here's the difference. We just talked about Dennis, who had surgery. He was in the hospital this
He's
morning.
listening, right?
He's listening. He just acknowledged on the live stream that he's listening, and John, of course, not listening. So let's make sure we make a notation of that. But anyway, Stephen, we have to get ready to take a break. But um, when we come back today, I want to ask all of you something simple, but it's not an easy question. Are you living your life or are you performing it? Think about that question. From the moment that we wake up, many of us slip into a role. Sometimes maybe a parent, a leader, a partner, a friend, a colleague, sister, brother, and without even realizing it, Stephen, we start playing to an audience, and we say the right things. We wear the right expressions. We meet everyone else's expectations, all while quietly setting aside our own truth. But here's the cost: when we live Well, hello and welcome back. And I am sorry for that very drastic interruption, but we lost power. And so we had to wait for the generator to come back on, and then we had to wait for the Wi-Fi to come back on, and I am now waiting for Stephen the Medium to come back on. But hopefully, all of you are back. All of you continue to be listening. And let me go back. Let me go back so that we can frame today's conversation. So again, today's conversation is about or are you performing? What's the difference between living authentically or living for approval? And before we got so rudely interrupted, I was talking about, from the moment that we wake up, many of us slip into roles, whether it's a parent, a leader, a partner, a friend, a colleague, a sister, brother, and without even realizing, we start playing to an audience and we say the right things, we wear the right expressions, we meet everyone else's expectations, all while quietly setting aside our own truth. But at what cost? When we live for approval instead of alignment, we trade authenticity for applause. Think about that. We may
I'm here.
look like, oh, awesome, Stephen. We may look like we're thriving on the outside, but inside, we're really running on empty. How many of you have experienced that? We experienced it probably on a day to day basis. So today's show is about taking a closer look at those moments where we're performing instead of living so that you can take a step back and step into your own skin and live a life that actually feels like yours. So I'll ask, what part of your life feels like a performance? As and if you were to drop that act, what would change? So that's today's conversation, Stephen. What do you think, Stephen? What do you think about this subject matter?
Well, first and foremost, you know what I'm glad is performing the generator. Just saying.
Me too. Me too. Yes.
So we're sorry about that. I did have Dave's number and I did text him to let him know. So
beautiful.
So what do I think about that? I think a lot about it because I think on some level, we do it. Every one of us does it. I was just thinking when you told me this morning about the subject matter, I was thinking when you meet somebody for the first time and you go out on a date, you're really performing, aren't you? For most of us, not all of us, but most of us are putting our best face on, looking good, acting really nice, acting sweet, acting funny. So to a degree, I think that is definitely performing because as you move forward and things get better and better, then people get to see the real you.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Excuse me, I totally agree with you. And if you're listening to this conversation and you're thinking, gee, I think I can so relate to what Stephen and Elix are talking about. Think about the last 24 hours of your life. How much of that time was spent doing things because you really genuinely wanted to, and how much was about meeting somebody else's expectations. And sometimes, by the way, we don't even realize, Stephen, that we're performing. Sometimes, I think we become so conditioned to living for somebody else's approval that we don't even realize that that's what we're doing because the roles become so part of our identity. And the reality is, unfortunately, the longer that you stay in that performance mode, the further you drift away from who you really are. And for me, Stephen, I'm gonna bring it back to to my culture. For example, I'm from Puerto Rico, Latin. There are some very specific roles that we're supposed to feel into, and and we get so conditioned early on that those are the roles that we're supposed to feel into. And for me, I realized for the longest time that, my whole life was all about seeking somebody else's approval. Am I good enough? How am I doing? Do you love me? What can I do differently to feel loved? Because, I feel less than. I don't feel you know, worth it, or whatever that is. But that is part of this conversation. Like, really, instead of living authentically for ourselves, we step into these roles sometimes determined by culture, determined by society, but sometimes self-imposed as well. Because, by the way, Stephen, social media, it's an act, and everyone is performing, and I think it's really hard to find real authenticity when it comes to social media. What are your thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, from the opposite of what I just gave as an example, when you're going on a date, I think, when you say self-imposed, I think a lot of it can be self-imposed, but I think also there's many cases where, as you mentioned, you don't know you actually are performing. Because I know in my particular experience, when my dad, when I was 8 years old, took his life, that completely changed me. And for years and years and years after that, I probably could have won awards for performing, and that's nothing I'm proud of because I wasn't living authentically at all. But I didn't know I was performing because of being 8 years old, and I was completely changed. I just kept going and going and going. And I mean, the performance was so strong that it ultimately made me go to law school and take the bar, pass the bar, and become an attorney. And I've mentioned this before, that just over the past couple of years or so, I realized that if it wasn't for that trauma when my dad took, there's no way I would have been an attorney. And it was definitely
Yeah.
performing to, again, as you just mentioned, making people know, see, feel that I am good enough, that I am smart enough, that I bring value. And ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of going to law school, and that's a lot, and passing the bar and becoming an attorney, that still didn't satisfy what the performing was trying to get me to. It is just it's an endless goal when you're performing. It never ever ends, and you never feel complete. So that was
I
my experience.
And Stephen, of course, in my work, my line of business as a coach, I coach executives. Some of my individual clients, I do some life coaching for them. And I hear so often, Stephen, people who come to me and they say, I am just not happy. I'm just not fulfilled. Yes, I have a very successful business. Yes, I have, you know, I'm doing well financially. But when you unpack that, I'm just not happy. I'm not fulfilled. And then the more we go into a deeper conversation, then I start to see that the reason why they're not fulfilled is because they've never given permission to themselves to live authentically. They are living because they're seeking somebody else's approval, because they're seeking validation from somebody else. And by the way, some of them are adults still seeking validation from their elder parents, or some of them are maybe adults that their cultures put them in a box, and they struggle with, but I can't come out of that box because then I'm going to be judged, I'm going to be evaluated. And that may be so, but the truth is that that choice comes with a very, very high expense. The expense of not living the life that you want, the expense of not living authentically, the expense of not honoring who you are, or even worse yet, Stephen, allowing somebody else to define you based on who they think you should be. And that to me is perhaps at the top of, the worst consequences of not of not living authentically, not being willing to step into that authentic world for yourself. Thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, and there's so many people that don't know that that's what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like trying to, you know, pin the tail on the donkey and trying to figure out why am I not feeling complete, or why am I feeling like I'm missing something, or why some days I feel good and some days I don't. It's not an easy thing, I think, to sort of figure out when you are performing versus living. And again, it depends on each person's situation or so. I mean, because like I just mentioned, for me, I had no idea I was performing. I was just doing what sort of life threw at me, and that's what I was doing. So it's in many cases, and unfortunately, in many cases, people don't ever get out of performing. They perform their whole life. Sometimes maybe they'll have that realization right before they're crossing, and you know, be able to share that with somebody, and sometimes not.
Yeah, yeah. That's really, oh my goodness, so insightful. But Stephen, we do need to take a commercial break. And if you are listening to this conversation, what I'm going to ask you is during the break, ask yourself, what would it look like to drop the act just a little for today? Just a little. What would that look like for you? And if you don't even know what the act is, then sort of dance around what is it that you may be pretending where you know you're not living your authentic self. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I'm your host, Coach Elex, and with me, my amazing co host,
Stephen the Medium.
Stephen the Medium is in the house. And today, if you're just joining us, we've been talking about the parts of life that can feel like a performance. You know, we've looked at the fear of losing approval, at the quiet exhaustion that comes from constantly managing other people's perception. So here's the question now. What would change if you gave yourself permission to be real, even if it meant not pleasing everyone? That question goes to Denise Petrusiewicz in the live stream because she just talked about being a people pleaser. But before we do that, Stephen, you wanted to add something to the conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, based on the experience that I've had, as I just mentioned with my dad taking his life, and for many years of performing, in going through therapy at some point, and mostly what helped me, including therapy, was when I found out I was a medium and could start speaking to dead people and start doing readings, right? Because doing readings is almost like therapy, that I am sharing messages from, people that are in spirit that want to either give guidance or give the person I'm reading their experience or help, whatever the case may be. So I get to hear a lot of that stuff. And then I started teaching, and on this subject, what I realized happened to me, and I think that it's sort of hopefully insight for people that are, like Denise said, a people pleaser or anybody else who feels like they're performing, is I realized that when my dad took his life, I checked out. I just left. We have a soul and a personality, right? The soul keeps continuing. The soul is where everything authentic is. Where your soul is, you're living authentically. The personality is the piece that's performing, right? So when we look at each other, that's the personality, and the soul is really the crust or the core of who we are. So at 8 years old, it was so overwhelming for me. And of course, I didn't know this for years later. And from my experience or assessment, this is what I feel. So I left. I checked out. It was like I walked out of my body and said, you know what? I can't do this. It's too much for me. I'm 8 years old. I can't do this. So somebody had to take over. So I called him the proxy. The proxy Stephen took over, one of them. So he came in and is looking like he's in a new job. And there's all these technical things, and I don't know. The proxy doesn't know what he's doing. I don't even know this soul. I don't know this personality. I know nothing. So I'm just gonna wing it. And then he just starts winging it. And then there comes something else that happens in life that this first number one proxy says, I don't think I can do this, but I'm going to stay. But you know what? I need a second proxy. So a second proxy Stephen comes in, and then the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth. And then you have just this chaos that is running the soul, because the personalities really run the soul. And thus the reason, if you read my book, you can see that I probably had a million proxies in here doing everything and causing havoc and hurting people and hurting themselves, and it goes on and on and on. So I call it just the checkout, right? And how I figure that out. And if you're thinking, regardless if this is making sense, or you just feel like you're living or you're performing versus living authentically, or you know somebody that you may want to help, what helped me, or the initial beginning of what helped me, was really trying to figure out, taking inventory and figuring out where I am, and starting with not what was going on, but what brought me joy. What really made me happy. And if you start there, then you start figuring out, well, if this really makes me happy, this brings me joy, but it has nothing to do with this life, there's something wrong. So that is the first step of the number one Stephen coming back in and slowly kicking the proxies out and taking over and taking over and taking over until you get to a place of losing the performance. And what you're really doing is, I always think it's like on a train, right? Every stop, you're just kicking out these performers that helped you, and you needed them because you weren't able to do it until you get to the last stop and there's no more performers, or you kick them all out, and then it's just you left, and you start living authentically. So I hope that makes sense to people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that when you talk about proxies, that is, a level of performance, right? Is that what you're saying?
Of
Because
course,
you
yeah.
said
Each
multiple
one.
proxies. That means you're performing like different chapters or different parts, if you will. That makes
Yes.
perfect sense to me. Yeah, I mean, for me, again, because I relate it back to what I'm doing, Stephen, is I'm constantly having these conversations with my clients, conversations that are, designed to empower them to be the best version of themselves. So if you are to be the best version of yourself, you can't be that if you're not being authentically you. And for me, I have to pay attention to that. Like when am I not being authentically me? Um, and but Stephen, I think for me it's like a constant, check in. Like it's not I'm done now, I'm perfect. It's I have to check that constantly because uh, I find myself wanting to seek approval from everyone, right? I want to be known as really good. I want my clients to love me, to like me, to acknowledge me. Um, and sometimes that compromises, like my core values. So I got to learn, like, how do I balance those core values with that desire to to want to please someone. So for example, if a client is disrespecting my time, say for example, Stephen, they make an appointment, they cancel the appointment, which is a form of disrespecting me and disrespecting my time. A part of me wants to call them out, but a part of me also says, well, lightly because you don't want to upset them, they're your client. How would you balance that, Stephen?
Well, first and foremost, that is not an easy balance, right? And I think you can use that example, and it doesn't have to be the relationship between like a business owner and a client. It can be anything, right? It can be your brother or sister, best friend, mom, dad. It doesn't matter. I mean, I think it's first and foremost, it's not easy. However, I think the way that I do it, because both of us have our own business, is again, you want to each situation is different, right? So each situation is evaluated, and when it comes to a an experience that someone is just not, again, as you mentioned, valuing your time and missing appointments or so, I think if you've got that really strong foundation of who you are and the value you bring, and see it through those eyes, and see that it is a business, but with the almost like contingency to try to share that with that person, so that they not only see or are now notified that this is not going to be continuing, but the greatest thing is, in your particular case, if you do it correctly, which I know you do, you're, I'm sure, able to get some feedback from the person for the most part, which all ties in to your coaching business anyway, because you're getting another level of why is this person doing it in the first place. So I always try to look at the other side and see the perspective, and see if I can figure something out. But there's times that you have to just be your own advocate and say, this is my business, and this is going to be the parameters, and I'll let you just slip by them a couple of times, but when it happens the third time, it's done.
Yeah.
It's not done. I mean, in my business, if you lose, I mean, if you don't make an appointment, I'll always ask, and unless someone will automatically tell me what the reason is. But I have people that just say to me, I forgot. And I know how valuable my time is, and it's already listed on the website. And I just tell the person, I'm really sorry, but I would love to do a reading, but you have to start from the beginning all over again, which means you have to pay a fee. Because if I did that for everybody, I would be given freebies, and it's just it's not a tit for tat. It is a business for me,
Yeah.
and it takes up more time that I could have somebody else doing business with. If.
Yeah. Well, I think, in this, I have one a specific example. I don't want to go into details because I don't want to, I don't want to expose client, coach information. But anyways, it was something to, again, in the background, performance, right? Like, I want to please them. I want them to like me. I want them to think I'm the best. But they kept saying, I'm going to promise to have this to you by tomorrow. Didn't happen. I'll have it by the next day. Didn't happen. I'll have it by the next day. Didn't happen. The whole week goes by. And I call them out. And in the response that I got is, well, you have a much higher standard than me, and you're not being very fair. And a part of me, for a moment, went into second guessing myself because of that desire to instead of being authentically me, Stephen, that desire to want to, seek validation from someone else. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, of course it does. But the whole point of this is that it is every experience, as I mentioned, is different, and it's not always easy
Yeah.
to figure that out. And sometimes you make that decision, and then after you make that decision and have that conversation, you end the conversation thinking, "Oh boy, did I do the right thing?" I mean, it
Yeah.
happens. It just
Yeah.
that's just because of being who we are as human beings, right?
It's part of our humanness, so we got to give
Yeah,
ourselves
exactly.
grace. And you know what? We need to give ourselves right now a commercial break. So let's take a commercial break and we'll continue with this amazing conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And hello and welcome back to our show. You're listening to Get a Grip with Coach Helix. And today's show is about choosing authenticity over performance. We've uncovered the cost of the act and the freedom that comes with dropping it. In this final stretch, we are going to talk about practical ways to take off that mask and start living in alignment with who you say you really are, authentically you. And I know, Stephen, in the last segment, you talked a little bit about what are some of the things that people could do to begin that process. What else can you give our listeners as a practical way to begin to take off the mask of that act?
You know what I think above and beyond what I mentioned about just being curious and thinking about what brings you joy, what is your muse, that sort of category. I think also in conjunction with that is just getting familiar with who you really are. Because if you're somebody who is performing, like I just referenced in that whole analogy, if you will, about the proxies and whatnot, for me to come back into my body and start the process of kicking out those proxies, first and foremost, before I do that, I have to figure out who I am. Like I've been away for so long, meaning that I've been, if you will, performing, right? Because it's not really me, it's others. It is me, but it's you know what I mean, it's not genuinely me performing. When I come back, I have to sort of relearn my connection with my soul, because that's really where the passion and purpose and the meaning of why you're here in the first place. So I think just being able to learn more about yourself, meaning that you get introduced back introduced to yourself. As a matter of fact, in 21 after COVID, I did that, which I think is still on my website. I did a presentation about introducing yourself to you, because of what happened with 2020 and the pandemic and whatnot, and how just that threw everyone off. So you have to learn who you are. You have to be familiar with who you are, and you have to love yourself. And you have to be able to go out for an afternoon by yourself, meeting nobody, and just do whatever you're doing and just love the fact that you're with yourself.
I love that, Stephen. I'll add my little piece on my end of what I do. As I've mentioned many times before, a lot of the work I do is creating vision statements with my clients. I have one for myself. And in those vision statements, Stephen, I put anchor statements. And for me, is one of my anchor statements is I fulfill the highest, truest expression of myself as a human being. That calls me, that grounds me, that anchors me. So I go back to that. In what I would say, if you're listening in this conversation, it's really striking a chord for you. Ask yourself, when you strip away the roles, the expectations, that carefully curated image that you've been, polishing year after year after year, ask yourself, who are you really? And when was the last time that version of yourself got to come out and breathe and be authentically, itself? I think that it creates an opening to begin to discover, the difference between that performance and stepping into living authentically. Because again, for me, Stephen, when I think of I fulfill the highest, truest expression of myself as a human being, if I'm acting, if I'm seeking somebody else's approval, I'm certainly not fulfilling the highest, truest expression of myself as a human being. I'm doing something else, but not that. So I ask myself, what does that look like? What would it take to look like? And to be honest with you, a lot of it I've learned from you, because, I've learned to to really honor authentically who I am, even when it is scary, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's in the midst of disapproval. Because the reality is, that was my life. My life was about, I couldn't be myself because it's not approved. But somehow I discovered that that was the only way I could be just myself. And I never allowed somebody else to define me. I define myself. Is there a cost associated with that? Absolutely. But there's also a cost associated with stepping into a performance or living a life where you're just, you know, doing, you know, waiting for somebody else to validate you. Does that make sense, Stephen?
Yeah, yeah, of course it does. And let me just say that as we're talking about it, this is not easy. When I think you referenced this at the beginning of the show, Elix. When you're doing something for so long and you're performing for so long, it is so difficult to change that. It's worth it 100%. But imagine the analogy I talked about, getting on the train and each stop taking, kicking those performers out. And let me tell you, those performers are going to fight you to the end. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. We're doing fine. Look, I got to protect him or her. I'm good. I'm doing fine. And that is the people that just don't let go and don't stop fighting and getting rid of those performers are the people that completely change their lives for the better. But listen, it's hard. You have to dig, and it's almost like going to a therapist and sitting with the therapist, but not telling the therapist like the biggest part of why you're there, completely putting that aside and never bringing it up and thinking, oh my God, I'm good. The therapist is telling me I'm good when the therapist doesn't know exactly why you're there and what the issue is. So it's not easy, but it's so doable and it's so worth it.
Yeah, love that, Stephen. And I think if I'm to leave our listeners with one last thought is remember, authenticity does not need to be loud. It does not need to be dramatic or even perfectly polished. It just needs to be real. You need to ask yourself, what is that mean for you? And the more you practice it, the more life stops feeling like this performance and starts feeling like it really is truly that life that you authentically want for yourself. Anything else you would want to add to that, Stephen?
No, I mean, I think the only thing I would add, which I love what you just said, is also forgiveness. I had to forgive myself
yes.
for so many, many years of when I was even getting into that train and throwing out those proxies. I still had that feeling of blaming myself, like, what's wrong with you? Why did you leave for that many years? And once I realized it was a necessity at the time, and once I also realized that I just needed to forgive me for the situation, for anyone out there that's a people pleaser, like Denise said, forgive yourself for doing that. You just have to have forgiveness with yourself. You have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah. And I also call that giving yourself grace, because at the end of the day, our humanness is our humanness, right? And there's a phrase or a saying that says, to be human is to err. So you have to give room for your humanness. You know, there's no such thing as perfection, and just like you said, Stephen, just keep forgiving yourself. So, what I would say to all of you who just listened to today's conversation is thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us your time so generously and so authentically. And until our next show, be bold, be real, and stay in the conversation. We really love to engage you every week in our conversation. So, Stephen, we are at the very top of the hour. So, what what else would you like to tell people? Where to find you? Reminder of the events that are coming up if they just join.
You just go to stephenthemedium.com and everything is listed there, so you know exactly what I'm doing. You can book an appointment, you can book a whisper in a note. And on social media, same thing, Stephen the Medium across the board, and you can see what we're up to. So that's how this works.
And we're
thank
always
you, by the
up
way.
to something. Yeah. And what
I
was
was
that?
going to say, and thank you to Dave again for just being our lifeboat here in making sure that we can do the show.
I tell you, his head is growing bigger by the minute with all these compliments that he gets from us. So just
we're
let's
very thankful
take
for
it
him.
easy, slow down. We are thankful. Slow down. Let's just one little compliment at a time. We love you, Dave.
Well, and also thank you to Jim and everyone else.
Of
You know,
course.
Jim, the station manager, because they're certainly allowing Dave to do this too. So you got a good group of guys over there.
Appreciate it. And wherever you are and whatever you do, remember to support public radio. That is our number one intention. So we need all of you to stand behind these stations across the nation who relied on our public support. So with that said, you can find me at Coach Elix. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye, everyone.